Harvey Weinstein's sexual assault trial in New York now has a jury. The 12-person panel was seated Friday. It consists of 7 men and 5 women. 3 alternate jurors were also chosen, 1 man and 2 women. The disgraced producer is accused of raping a woman at a Manhattan hotel in 2013 and sexually assaulting another woman in 2006. Weinstein has pleaded not guilty. He denies all allegations against him. The trial is set to begin next Wednesday in New York. Attorney Jesse Weber joins me now. Jesse, the jury has finally been set for the Weinstein trial. Walk me through some of the process. You've been in the courtroom. You've seen it all.
So I actually can't believe we're actually at this point. 2,000 summons were actually issued. 600 jurors were ultimately questioned. Both sides went through a number of questionnaires. Beginning yesterday, they had 146. And then, believe it or not, it only took about a day and a half to get that number down to 15 jurors, 12, and then 3 alternates. It was quite the process. And one of the most amazing things that I saw were just a number of jurors, prospective jurors, who came forward and said, I can't be impartial. I've heard about the case. I know about them through X, Y, and Z. They raised their hands, and they were screened out. I didn't know if we were going to see that. Now we're at the place where we hope to believe that these 15 jurors can be impartial. And maybe more importantly, they were asked, if you render a not guilty verdict, can you go back to your family and friends and tell them that you did that? Can you deal with the pressure afterwards? Because this is the most high-profile case, and I will say one of the most important cases we've seen in the century. And this decision is going to be on them forever.
It's a big jury to be on. There was a lot of controversy in the courtroom about the imbalance of men versus women, male versus female jurors. What is the final jury makeup? And what does it mean for the defense, do you think? So
we got 7 men, 5 women. The men are predominantly white males. The women predominantly women of color. 3 alternates. You have 2 women, 1 male. Now, just if you look at it from that point of view and you base it upon gender lines and age lines, you would say, doesn't that benefit Weinstein? And that's an easy way to look at it. But I don't think it's that easy to say that, because these jurors really went through a vigorous screening process. And I was there. I was in court to hear the questions posed by both the prosecution and the defense. Let me tell you, great questions that were asked by both sides.
What were some of the questions? What struck you?
So if you ask the prosecution, they obviously both sides want to know about media exposure, but the prosecution asked such an interesting question. They said, well, if you see a robbery, or if you heard about a robbery and someone doesn't fight back, they put up their hands, they give their money, that's still a robbery, right? Because they're trying to say about rape. And if you don't fight back, that could still be rape. The defense had a great question. If you see our defense vigorously cross-examining a witness, do you consider that victim shaming? What do you think victim shaming is? And these questions about what is consent? What does it mean to have these relationships? Such important questions. And they prepared the jury that you're going to hear from multiple women. It's not going to be easy. They're going to be very emotional, and you have to really look carefully at what the prosecution says and what the defense says. Great questions on both sides, and now they have a jury.
And consent is always at the center and a really difficult part of these trials, rape trials, sexual assault trials. Under what circumstances would the alternates be called?
Okay, so that's very important. And I have to tell you, I'm a little surprised that we only have 3 alternates. I expected we were going to get 18 jurors in total. This is a long trial. This is going to be about 6 to 8 weeks. Things happen. You really expect that these jurors are not going to hear something about this case, or they might have a conflict. Maybe they'll get sick. You need an alternate to step in. Now, they're not sequestered. They're not put in a hotel room where they don't hear anything about this. They are expected and instructed to stay away from social media. We heard a juror yesterday who not only was kicked off, but he was told to report back to the courtroom in March because he violated the court's order, tweeted, and he was threatened with contempt. So this is a long time for them not to speak to anybody about the case, to not hear anything, not tweet. They will have to be honest. You want them to be honest if they heard anything, if they spoke to anybody, and they're coming in and out of that courtroom. Their protests, their demonstrations, they have to keep a closed mind in that way and then open their mind when they go into the courtroom. Stuff happens in 6 to 8 weeks.
We talked a little bit about the female jurors. The defense was criticized specifically for trying to eliminate young, white female jurors. There are 2 white women on the final jury pool. What do we know their ages? What do we know about them?
Okay, so here's the interesting part. The defense didn't want them on. They lost their preemptory challenges, which are these kind of special challenges.
Because, of course, they are like many of the victims.
Yes, that's why if you look at him as the defendant, having white males looks great, and if you have white female jurors, it's beneficial for the prosecution. They lost their amount of challenges they had to get these women off. Now, one of the women was actually very problematic. She wrote a novel that deals with very similar topics about young women with older men. It's being released, I think, in 2021. The defense didn't have a challenge to get rid of her. They tried to strike her as saying it's impartial. The judge said no. They asked for a mistrial. The judge said no. She's on the jury. So she's one of those women. But again, she's just one juror. But really, if you think about it, you only need one juror to say no or yes. You need a unanimous jury decision. Otherwise, you get a mistrial.
If you had to grade the jury in the defense eyes, what would you give the group?
I think that it's so hard to tell what their strategy is and each person's makeup. But if I had to look just from the optics point of view, it seems to benefit the defense more than the prosecution. When you have more men, when you have white males. Having said that, call me an optimist. I like to believe that all of them are impartial, and they were selected, and both sides, I think, are proud of this jury, and they expect a lot from this jury. So I'm praying that these jurors are going to be impartial, that they'll take the facts, and that they won't make a decision based upon anything that they've heard on the outside, whether supporting or hurting Harvey Weinstein. That's the kind of jury you need. That's what we expect from the criminal justice system. And really, you don't want a tainted verdict in this case, because let's say he is convicted. And I know there's a lot of people that want him to be convicted, and maybe rightfully so. But the last thing that you want is to have a conviction, then hear about some issue that happened in trial. It gets tossed out, and you start all over.
This case has been in the media for nearly 3 years nonstop. The defense has argued that, the trial needs to be moved somewhere else. Do you think there's any chance that will happen?
So it's interesting you asked me that, because the appellate court could have said yesterday, this trial's not being moved. They said the trial's not being delayed, but they waited to hold that decision until next week before the jury's sworn in. I have to believe they might be considering this, because I know that the defense lost that motion a long time ago. But we're dealing with a very different situation. The trial has begun. These protests are happening. We see things happening all the time. On the eve of jury selection, the LA charges were dropped. This is a different set of circumstances, and I wonder if that appellate court is actually considering, well, maybe we should move this to Long Island. Maybe we should move this to upstate New York. But does that mean you keep the same jury? Do you get a new jury? They're thinking about the consequences, and we'll wait and see. If I was a betting man, I would say that this trial is moving forward here in Manhattan.
And like you just mentioned, then another trial in Los Angeles with new charges from two witnesses, two women.
Absolutely. So what happens here is only the first step for Harvey Weinstein.
Jesse Weber, thank you.
Thank you.